I hope you're enjoying your walk around the lake. As we walk to the Spitfire, just pause for a moment to look back towards the cafe and compare these two photos. This end of the lake was much narrower, and the edge of the lake was just a grass bank. The girl is standing over one of the small drainage streams that flowed from the marsh. As we walk along, they can still be seen today feeding into the lake. This area of the lake by the Spitfire is now very popular with our visiting Canada geese, but if you came down here in the 1950s and 60s, you would have seen boys and girls enjoying a sunny afternoon catching the small crabs in the lake using nothing more than a weighted piece of string with bacon rind tied to it. I hope you brought your knitted swimsuit, because it's now time to take a dip in the water. As soon as the lake was formed, swimming was catered for. Changing huts were erected and an area cordoned off to keep the boats clear. When King Edward's School opened in 1908, the boys were taken down to the lake to learn to swim. One schoolboy noted that he spent most of his time swimming with the rats and came out dirtier than when he went in. Ladies were not allowed to swim in the lake until water closets had been built, and even then they could not swim before 9 o'clock in the morning. In 1924, the bathing area was closed by the new council. The water quality was deemed to be poor from the streams running off the moss, and an employee had broken his neck when diving in. The deep end of the lake was opposite the cafe, and that was only 3 feet 6 inches, so it was much less at this end. The Spitfire display reminds us of the part this coast played in the Second World War, with an American air base along the river at Wharton and Wellington bombers built at Blackpool. Like many towns at the time, the people were asked to raise funds towards the war effort, and funding the building of an aircraft was just one of those ideas. This replica Spitfire represents the aircraft paid for by the contributions of the residents of Lytham St Anne's. We're now going to walk around to the south side of the lake to hear more about this corner of the lakeside. Following the outbreak of war in 1939, a gun emplacement was built on the Stannerbank seawall in August 1940. The inner promenade was closed to public traffic using dragon's teeth or pimples of concrete which can still be seen today at the end of the car park. The paths around this corner of the lake were also closed. The rest of the lake remained open and the water level maintained in case it should be needed for firefighting. The gun battery would defend the estuary of the Ribble in the event of enemy attack or bomber raids on the docks of Liverpool and Preston. There were 2 4-inch ex-naval guns mounted on brick blockhouses served by 80 soldiers. During their time in use, they managed to shoot down 2 enemy aircraft. The shock wave when the guns were fired was so intense it sometimes caused damage to the windows of the houses on the inner promenade, and local people recalled soldiers from the gun battery calling at houses to warn of any practice firings. The gun battery was initially manned by a Royal Artillery platoon, but they were replaced in 1942 by the St Anne's Home Guard. In February 1945, the battery was taken out of service and the guns removed before the Stannerbank Path and foreshore were reopened. The following year, in April 1946, Royal Engineers from a training battalion based at Fulwood Barracks in Preston were tasked with demolishing the emplacement. Additional labour came from Hungarian prisoners of war who kept the public away along the shore while the brick structures were blown up in a series of explosions. Recent surveying work of this area of the lake unearthed several artefacts from this period. This is a good site to talk about the next area of the lake and an important period in its development, so now is the time to view our next walk.